Okay, so in the last video, we created a new inventory table and we created a form that is linked to that table. We said our goal is to have the form modify the values in that table. So instead of adding new rows like in the other videos, we want to modify those rows. There are three modifications I can think of. Adding, so say you received a shipment. Subtraction, maybe it's client-facing, customer-facing, and they're purchasing like Amazon. Or possibly it's an internal inventory system, and so maybe someone requisitioned 3 printers, and so you have to subtract printers on hand by 3, or printers in storage by 3. And the third one is a complete override. Why would you want to do an override instead of addition and subtraction? That would be in the case of, say, like a retail store that just did its inventory annually, and they found that there is a discrepancy, which happens all the time. Well, you don't want your employees to have to do the math, and that's not meant to be a criticism of them. You're trying to capture the actual data point, let the database do the calculation. So in the cases of add, they're not doing the addition, they're saying how much is being added to it because that's what the receipt says in front of them. You just received 10 red herbs, okay, 10 add, so there's no math involved. It's doing the math. Subtraction, customer bought 1 object, so it gets subtracted by 1. Again, they're not doing the math, the system's doing the math. And therefore, to be consistent, the override too must avoid doing the math. So the override, you just put in the new amount. So the inventory system says it's 300, but you counted 200. You don't do 100 subtract, you do 200 override. And then you create a report that says, oh, by the way, John Doe just changed this amount by 100 on such and such date. Go find out why. That kind of thing. So you really don't want your employees to have to do the math. You really want them to put in the exact data points, and then the system does the math. And again, generates reports on those discrepancies. So to make this simple, we're going to create just one field that you put a value in, but then 3 different buttons to manipulate that value. So we're going to click up here. And again, this top part is just the label, so you can do whatever you want with it. So what we're going to do is, rather than have it be called text 13, which is meaningless, let's actually use the label as a description, or an instruction rather. So rather than a description, it's an instruction. So enter a value. So now, rather than being a meaningless description, you've actually given them instructions. You could also add text box over here that say 1, enter value, 2, click on a button. Now, let's take this, and we're going to do something that I don't think we did in the other videos. We're going to actually modify the name of the object. Now, in this case, it's not linked to anything, so that's fine to change the name. So as you can see, it's called text 13. That's really not friendly, and the more and more text boxes you have in your database, the less likely you're going to remember it. So I don't think we did this in the previous videos. So let's rename this quantity change. Well, actually, it's not. Let's make it quantity entered because it's not necessarily a change. So quantity entered. That way, when you're doing the Visual Basic coding and you see the field come up that says quantity entered, it's like, oh, I know what that does. So let's create the first button. So up here is the button. We'll do this. We're going to cancel this out for now. We're going to do this manually. Highlight this, and we're going to change. Now, this is just the label for the button is built into the button itself. So this doesn't actually change the name of the button. So I want to clarify that. So let's do add. So you just received a delivery, and so now you've got more of them. See, if you come over here, it still says command 15. So this is a label. This text overlaid is a label. Now, if you wanted to, you could create a separate label. Where is it? That one right there. You could put a label above the button if you want, but that's not really typical. So now that we've changed the label, let's actually change the button name itself. We'll call this add button. If I could avoid extraneous caps. So watch how much easier this is to code. It becomes more self-documented. So we've clicked on the button. We click on event if it's not already clicked, and we click on the ellipsis next to onClick because we want this functionality to occur when the button is clicked. We do code builder and see private sub add button click. So that's much more self-documenting. It is the add button rather than just saying command 13. And it's telling you it's the click functionality. It would have said that anyways, but at least it makes this make more sense. You're clicking on the add button. Okay. So what do we want to happen when we click on the add button? Let's slide this over. What we want to have happen, this field needs to be modified by this field. So what would that look like? So this field, you address it by saying me. So me refers to the form that the object is attached to that has a script attached to it. So the script is attached to the button is attached to the form, so form is me. So me dot product quantity. So again, that using a descriptive name when you're making the table in the first place, because that's what this is. This is the actual name of the table. So you choose product quantity. So product quantity on me on the form is going to be set to me dot, again, product quantity plus, because we're doing the add function, that new text box that we added. And we said that is me dot quantity entered. So see how it's much more self-documenting? Clicking on the add button, product quantity is increased by quantity entered. If you're not used to coding, it's still kind of wonky, but you can see how it's much more self-documenting. It's much more friendly to you, the designer, without negatively impacting what the end user has to see. Now, here's the thing. What you've done is you've changed the quantity, but your button is still enabled, and we don't want that. We want the button to become disabled or enabled false in the term of in the parlance of coding. So me dot add button dot enabled equals false. So now we save this and watch what happens. Save the form as well. So the first save was for the code, the second save is for the form. So let's choose green herb, which is sitting at 40. I believe the number is different than the end of the last video because I was doing some testing. Now, I'm going to jump around a bit, but it's very important to know when a change occurs. So I'm sorry, I'm really not trying to confuse anyone, but when you're dealing with the database, it's absolutely essential to know exactly when a task has occurred. So watch this. Enter a value. We want to increase it by 10. So green herb says 40, increase by 10, add. It says 50. But watch what happens when we open inventory. It's still 40. So why is that? You have to be very, very careful with the coding. Let's take a look at it again. We didn't update product quantity in the table. We updated product quantity on the form. When you close the form, then the database reconciles the difference. So again, we come here, it's set at 40. Watch what happens. We're going to just close this form, go to inventory, now it's 50. So it's really important to know that this is doing literally what you're saying for it to do. It's updating product quantity on the form, and then behind the scenes it gets reconciled once the form closes. So very important to understand the difference. So let's go ahead and close that. So I won't do that again. I don't want to jump around too much, but it's very important to understand exactly when something happens in the database. Okay, so now, as you can see, it grays out. So it grays out, it becomes disabled, it becomes enabled false. That way you can't keep hitting the button. So now it's kind of just rinse and repeat. So let's go to design form. And now we just add the new button. So we click on button, put it there, hit cancel if you want to check to see if the sizes are the same. 1.25 by 0.5. 1.25 by 0.5. You can line it up. You don't want the buttons to be too close together because you don't want people to accidentally click on the wrong one. And again, we'll change what the text says. We'll change this to reduce. Now, if this is, say, client-facing, customer-facing, it would probably say purchase or add to cart, that kind of thing. But like I said, I don't want to do a full-fledged storefront. I'm just showing you how to affect values based on button clicks. And then we'll, in a later video, we're going to show you how to disable these buttons and limit these buttons based on the values. But that's really too much to do in just one video. So for reduce, we're going to come here to all, and we're going to call it, let's keep the naming consistent. So this one was add button. So let's call this one reduce button. And again, capitalizing the U. Go to event, click on the ellipsis, go to code builder. Ignore this. I did a split in the middle, or should I say a splice in the middle of this video, and was just testing some stuff. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this, copy it, and paste it. And now you just need to match, let's see. So this is when you're adding. Now you're reducing. So we want me.product quantity subtracting, or me.quantity entered subtracted from me.product quantity. So not trying to confuse anyone by copying. I just want to show this is not really new functionality. You're just copying and pasting, you're just rinsing and repeating. It's the same functionality, you're just making one change. You're making the calculation mimic what you're intending the button to do. Because calling it reduce button, calling it add button does nothing. That's just reminding you, designer, what you want it to do. This is what's making it add and subtract. And we don't want add button to be enabled or disabled. We want it to be reduce button. But there's a problem with this. If I click on this button, this one won't be disabled. I really want to disable all the buttons once one has been clicked. Now there's probably another way to do it, but this is a very small database, so a little bit of redundant coding isn't a big deal. So what we do is just paste one up there and paste the other one down here. So now they both have add button enabled false, reduce button enabled false, reduce button enabled false, add button false. So we'll save this. Again, save the form. So, first aid spray sitting at 13. 10. Reduce. I won't do it again, but like I said, inventory hasn't been changed yet until you close this. Well, actually, I will close it so you can see the change. So this will say 3. When we go back in, we don't actually have to open the table to do it. We just come back here and see it set to 3. So again, the reconciliation occurs when the form closes, so ultimately we're going to add a button here that just says close. All right, getting close. Again, cancel. Let's take a look at the size. Perfect. So as I was saying, there are 3 basic functions: an addition, a reduction, and a complete override. As I said, I'm not really great at layout, so the actual positioning does not impact the functionality. This is really just what makes sense to the end user. So an override, event, ellipsis, code builder. Forgot to change the name, but that's okay. You can see now it's not nearly as nice to look at. This is add button, this is command, this is reduce button. So it'll be a teachable moment. This is what happens when you don't change it. It looks worse. So actually, might as well do what I said and just copy and paste. But this one we need a substantial change to, because in this case we're just doing a straight up override. So we're not doing a calculation. We're just going to say me.product quantity is being set to me.quantity entered. And we want me dot command 20 to be set to disabled, which now means we take that, bring it up to the other ones as well, and then just take the other 2 and bring it there. So now all 3 buttons get disabled every time. Again, there might be a little bit more concise way to do this in a small database. It's not a big deal. And like I said, this is really just instructional. Now that you know how to do this, you can then take the time to optimize on your side. So we save the code, save the form. This time we'll do red herb 56 override, so it overrides it rather than adds it. So red herb should be 56. Go back in, and sure enough, there it is, 56. This holds on to, I believe, it's either the first value in the table or the last value chosen. I think it's the first value in the table. So you can always put in a line of code that blanks this out, but that's okay. Again, devil's in the details. We can get to that in a later video. This is just showing you the basic functionality. So let's do that again. So let's see, 10. Everything's disabled now. All right, last thing, one more button. Now this time we will use this because it's a very simple function. So form operation, close form, next, just say close. Next, close, finish. You can make the button the same size to match the other ones, or have it be a different size to make it more salient. Now this I'm going to change. So I called it close and I really wasn't thinking, because I changed not just the caption, but the name of it. So let's call this close button. And let's make the first C lowercase just to be consistent with the naming that I chose. So again, you don't want to use close because that's a function. Okay, caption's okay. That's not affecting the function, but the button itself we're going to have to refer to. So again, teachable moment. I could go back and edit that out, but I'd rather let you see my mistake and know that it's easy enough to fix. And you can do other things, like can change like the color and that, like make it red or whatever, or green. Again, make it more salient. We won't do that here because we're just focusing on the functionality. So we save, and that should do it. So let's see. So first aid spray is 3. We'll add 22, so that means it should become 25. Add, close, and we'll go back in. Okay, 25. Now, why is that showing up as blank green herb? Let's go to inventory table. It is blank. I'll have to double check to make sure I didn't do anything wrong. The only thing I could think of is I hit override when this was blank. Let's test that right now again, another teachable moment. So let's leave this as blank. Override, that's what happened. I hit override when this was blank, so let's close this, and I bet red herb will be blanked out as well. Yep, so that's what's going on. So that's another thing we're going to have to check, that we're going to have to put some controls on this as well. So just as we're going to have controls on these buttons based on this, we're also going to put some controls on this. Like, we don't want this to be able to exceed this number if you're doing subtraction, because that's a problem. We don't want to this to be a blank, which is easy enough. You could say do not allow null values, but again, don't want to get into that now. That's really, again, the details, and this was meant to be the broad strokes. So here you go. You now have a form that can add, reduce, and override a value really geared towards inventory or, stock of items. And we're going to stop here. And in the next video is where we're going to start changing these functions based on this value. Mainly, the reduce is going to be disabled or limited by how much you can reduce it by. So that should about do it.